Pack your stuff, Taylor. You have 30 days. Carlos and I are turning this place into our home. The words sliced through the warm Capitol Hill afternoon, landing harder than the pruning shears still humming in Megan's hand as she trimmed her glowing wall of hydroponic basil. In a flash, I pictured my monitors yanked from their stands, my books tossed into liquor store boxes, my life stacked like curbside clutter on an already brutal Seattle street. I didn't yell, didn't plead. I simply closed my laptop, opened a new spreadsheet, and let an easy smile spread across my face, because Megan had no clue how much fire fits behind a quiet grin. And she definitely didn't know that tenant law in Washington is my secret hobby. My name's Taylor Reed, 28 freelance DevOps engineer for whichever artificial intelligence startup survives this summer's layoff wave. I work from my bedroom command center, pay rent on time, and can quote the Washington landlord-tenant statute faster than most attorneys can refresh social media. Capitol Hill is my heartbeat late-night noodle runs on Broadway neon thrift shops under the light rail. Open mic jazz floating through every alley. 16 months ago, gallery curator and rising plant talk influencer Megan Calloway signed the same 50-50 lease I did. Same rent, same rights. Enter chef Carlos Martinez, owner of a 200,000 subscriber cooking channel and a carbon steel knife ego to match. At first, he was here 3 nights a week, then 5, then every morning frying kimchi rice for his subscribers while I tried to deploy code. I tolerated the clang of pans at 2 a.m. I even pretended his unannounced live streams, which turned our kitchen into background noise for the internet, didn't bother me. But when Megan demanded that I bankroll their next relationship milestone by vanishing, something inside me locked into place. Self-help podcasts call it hidden strength. Mine is data. I tag every Venmo split, every maintenance ticket, every oversized utility spike from her grow lights. I archive Carlos's stay-over texts, the ones that quietly break our guest limit clause. And I know word for word the paragraph that says, a co-tenant cannot evict another co-tenant without mutual consent. So buckle up. In the next few minutes, you'll watch a remote engineer turn a spreadsheet into a sledgehammer. You'll see how a basil wall, a viral cooking channel, and Seattle's rent crisis collide. And by the time the herbs wilt, you'll be cheering for the quiet one. Before we dig into the receipts, hit like if you think renters deserve a fighting chance, tap subscribe so you don't miss the twists, and drop a comment with the worst roommate ultimatum you've ever heard. Ready to rewind to where this slow burn revolt truly began. Let's go. Capitol Hill in August feels like living inside a neon-lit greenhouse. The air hums with the Pacific Northwest's late summer heat, and rent prices climb even faster than the vines on Megan's LED grow wall. When we first toured the place 16 months ago, it felt gigantic. 12-foot ceilings, exposed brick, a shoebox backyard that the listing called Urban Oasis. We were both clutching iced Americanos, sweaty with excitement that we'd beaten 30 other applicants, and we shook on a verbal promise to keep the vibe respectful and equitable. I took the smaller bedroom facing the alley in exchange for setting up my standing desk in the living room, so we could pretend it was a shared co-working space. Megan, forever a curator, claimed the master with its ensuite bath and south-facing windows, perfect for her budding plant talk empire. She spent her weekends installing vertical planters running irrigation tubing under the floorboards and training edible nasturtiums to cascade like living art. I thought it was cool. My only request was that the water sensors not trip my circuit-heavy server rack. For a while, it worked. We alternated chores on a shared Google Sheet, split utilities down to the penny, and hosted low-key movie nights where nobody judged anyone's snack choices. Then, midway through spring, Carlos spilled into our lives like sriracha on white linen. It started harmless, a charming chef with a contagious laugh who swung by to pick Megan up after gallery shifts. He'd stay for dinner, whip up tacos from scraps in the fridge, and vanish before midnight. But after his channel blew past 100,000 subscribers, our apartment morphed into his test kitchen. Tripods colonized the countertops. Ring lights sprouted between basil towers, and the clatter of cast iron pans replaced the morning bird song. Night after night, viewers watched him poach salmon while I tried to debug container pipelines 10 feet away, my face reflecting in his saute pans like a reluctant cameo. Utility bills spiked, and the ventilator never got a break from cumin smoke. Still, I kept the peace, figuring success was a wave we could all ride. Megan assured me Carlos would shoulder a third of the bills once his visits exceeded the lease's 10-day guest limit, but the Venmo requests kept landing in my inbox split 50-50, as if the camera's extra data and nonstop stove didn't exist. I logged everything: dates, receipts, kilowatt readings from the smart meter, partly out of habit, partly because order calms me. Meanwhile, the rental market outside spiraled. The Rent Crisis 2025 banner flashed across every local feed, average one-bedrooms, pushing $2,200, bidding wars over studio basements, landlords demanding resumes. People joked that finding housing now required the same luck as matching with Beyoncé on Bumble. So when Megan dropped her 30-day ultimatum, she wasn't asking me to relocate. She was telling me to jump into shark-infested waters wearing flank steak cologne. Her justification: she'd poured money into the hydroponic garden and hand-sourced a mid-century sofa set she believed raised the apartment's soul. She claimed moral seniority because she spent Saturdays pruning instead of gaming. And Carlos needed a quiet place to film full-time without a random roommate photobombing with bedhead. She framed it as a step forward in her love story, suggesting I could easily crash with tech friends on the east side until I found something. The casual privilege of the ask stung more than the logistics. We had equal signatures on the lease, equal deposits, equal late-night trips to unclog the garbage disposal. Yet in her mind, my existence was a variable to delete because it didn't fit the couple goals narrative blooming across her socials. The first injustice wasn't even the demand itself. It was the months of incremental boundary nudges that led here: the extra toothbrush left on the sink, the memory card readers scattered across my mail shelf, the slow erasure of my seat at the kitchen table until I was eating ramen cross-legged in my room. Those chips didn't break me, but they taught me to keep score. I knew every Seattle housing ordinance, and I had raw data to back up each breach. More important, I knew the algorithm of public sympathy in a city grappling with skyrocketing rent. People love a David and Goliath story, especially one featuring spreadsheets, basil walls, and an overconfident influencer couple. All I had to do was organize the evidence, choose the right disclosure timing, and make sure my next moves stayed impeccably within legal lines. If Megan wanted the apartment to herself, she'd have to buy me out or back down. And given the numbers I'd been crunching, neither option looked cheap. Within 24 hours of Megan's ultimatum, the small frictions that had been tolerable background noise detonated into a daily barrage of petty power plays and public humiliations that felt choreographed for maximum viewership. First came the chore chart revision. She slid under my door. My name suddenly owned every unglamorous task: scrubbing the grease traps Carlos clogged during live streams, hauling 50-pound soil bags for her rooftop seedlings, wiping chili paste off cabinet doors she and her boyfriend splattered while filming a 30-minute udon challenge. The chart was printed on gallery-grade cardstock with her signature cursive, then posted on the fridge beneath a selfie of the two of them captioned, "Building our dream home together." I crossed off the chores that weren't mine and photographed the sheet for evidence. Next morning, I discovered the living room Wi-Fi router, a device I bought and pay for, had been unplugged and zip-tied inside a planter box labeled "Sensitive Sprouts, Do Not Disturb." My remote stand-up meeting lagged so badly that my manager asked if I'd moved to rural Montana. While Megan apologized with syrupy concern, Carlos adjusted his camera, thanked viewers for bearing with the lag, and announced that he and his fiancée, yes, fiancée, a fact I learned in real time with 40,000 strangers, were officially filming a room makeover arc. Apparently, the arc's climax would be my dramatic exit, By the end of the week, a brand new Amazon ring light appeared in the hallway outside my bedroom, pointed directly at my door like a spotlight waiting for the villain's entrance. Each night, after coding, I slipped noise-canceling headphones on and cataloged infractions, guest night counts decibel readings, kilowatt surges whenever Carlos's commercial-grade blender roared. Sunday Megan upped the ante by moving my sneakers, hoodies, and even my toothbrush into a plastic storage bin labeled Staging Area Taylor's Stuff. She left it beside the trash chute with a pastel post-it thought this might help you pack. I photographed the note, time-stamped the bin, and returned everything to its place. The next morning, my espresso beans were gone, replaced by a sticky note reading caffeine budget reallocated to household filming costs. Thanks for supporting the channel. In retaliation, I brewed drip coffee so strong the aroma clashed with their rosemary lime salmon shoot, ruining the take. Carlos hurled a sauté pan into the sink, hard enough to crack a plate, and then demanded I reimburse him for prop damage. I emailed the landlord instead, attaching photos of the broken dish, the cracked tile it hit, and our lease clause about negligent conduct. Tuesday night, I unlocked the apartment to find Megan hosting a gallery livestream entitled Curating Harmony, where she painted me as the stubborn roommate blocking her journey toward domestic bliss. She'd even pulled excerpts from my polite Slack messages, screenshotted without context to display as overlays, while she told viewers she couldn't wait to resolve things peacefully. My phone exploded with anonymous DMs calling me selfish, a freeloader, the tech bro who hates love. I responded once, linking the Washington tenant statute, then muted everything and added reputation damage to my damages ledger. By midweek, utilities spiked again. Carlos had installed a second induction burner to speed up shooting. I ordered a smart plug that logged usage per outlet and emailed the dataset to myself hourly. Thursday, 2 real estate agents arrived unannounced, jangling keys while I was on a client call. Megan had scheduled a quiet showing. I quoted RCW 5918 at them until they backed out the door, and I forwarded the incident to the property manager. That evening, Megan cornered me between the basil wall and the fridge phone, recording in hand, and said in a syrup-sweet tone, "We just need you out by the 1st so everyone can flourish." I smiled into the camera and replied, "Absolutely, once you compensate me for half the relocation cost, storage fees, and the incremental rent difference for comparable housing in this zip code." Her followers heard the numbers, nearly $7,000. Comments flooded in, half cheering, half flaming, but the seed of doubt had been planted. The turning point came Friday when Carlos, desperate for fresh content, filmed a live taste test with a sponsor's ghost pepper sauce. Mid-shoot, he ignored my warning about the temperamental smoke detector. When it shrieked, sprinklers fired, soaking thousands of dollars of camera gear, and every last LED, grow light, the ones Megan had bragged were humidity-resistant. Water pooled over my surge-protected server rack, but I'd elevated everything 2 inches days earlier after studying sprinkler schematics in the building's safety manual. Carlos screamed about brand deadlines while I calmly flipped the master breaker to prevent an electrical fire and recorded the flood damage on my phone. The landlord arrived with the fire crew, surveyed the soggy chaos, and demanded to know who authorized commercial filming in a residential unit. Megan tried blaming me for sabotage, but my time-stamped emails, utility logs, and the chore chart told a cleaner story: 2 tenants abiding by lease terms, and 1 unauthorized guest turning the apartment into a film studio. The landlord's face tightened when he saw the cracked tile and scorched cabinet finish. He announced that any lease renewal would require a substantial liability deposit payable immediately or an early termination with penalties shared by all responsible parties. Megan's jaw dropped. Carlos went pale, calculating equipment losses. I offered the landlord printed spreadsheets showing how diligently I'd tracked every expense and violation, along with a polite request to remain month to month under the existing rate if the others chose to vacate. Data, after all, is hard to argue with. By the time the fire crew left, Megan's pride was as wilted as her basil, and Carlos's channel had uploaded an unintentional blooper reel drenched in sprinkler water, one that racked up views but tanked sponsorship trust. Their narrative of me as the villain cracked under the glare of legal documents and high-definition reality, yet the conflict was far from over. The 30-day clock kept ticking, and I felt the moment approaching when evidence alone wouldn't suffice. I'd need a strategy that turned their own public platform into the pressure valve that secured my victory. The sprinkler fiasco should have ended the drama, but watching Megan dry ruined basil with a hairdryer while Carlos argued with a sponsor over Bluetooth finally snapped the last cord of my patience. Their damage control tactics were textbook shape, a new narrative milk sympathy pivot to a self-care vlog arc, but sympathy doesn't pay 4 figures in equipment loss, and it definitely doesn't erase a legal notice. The moment the landlord emailed a revised liability invoice 10 grand due in 72 hours or the lease would terminate, I recognized leverage powerful enough to flip the entire board. A quiet exit was never my goal. Equity was. So I spent Friday night mapping a retaliation pipeline as clean as any production deploy. First, I listed every pressure point in 3 columns: legal, financial, public perception. Under legal, I had guest limit violations, unpermitted commercial filming, property damage, unauthorized showings, and the defective notice to vacate. Financial covered the unpaid utilities spike, potential sprinkler system fees, and the landlord's new deposit demand. Public perception was my wild card. Megan's 32K Plant Talk followers loved sustainability. Carlos's 200K food fans worshipped authenticity, and both demographics despised exploitative behavior. I didn't need to destroy their brands. I only had to let their own inconsistencies breathe. Next came allies. I contacted the Seattle Tenants Union, forwarding my dossier and the fire marshal report. They scheduled a live Q&A on renters' rights for the coming Tuesday and invited me to speak anonymously. I also DM'd a journalist at The Stranger. The Alt Weekly thrives on local David versus Goliath sagas, and offered time-stamped footage of the illegal real estate showing plus sprinkler chaos if she'd blur my face. She bit within an hour. Meanwhile, I drafted an email to the landlord proposing a solution: allow me to assume the lease solo at current rent for an extra 6-month guarantee, offset by applying Megan's security deposit toward the sprinkler repairs. Because my credit score and remote income were solid, the numbers balanced neatly. He replied that if the others consented to vacate and paid outstanding fees, we had a deal. All that remained was to make vacating their best option. Saturday morning, I scheduled a live stream of my own, an unassuming walkthrough titled Real Talk Tenant Rights in a Creator Household. No drama bait thumbnails, just me in a plain hoodie webcam on spreadsheet behind. I stuck to facts: our 50-50 lease, Carlos's 120 recorded overnights utility surges, RCW 59.18 clauses, the landlord's invoice. I blurred their faces and used R&C initials, but anyone who followed their channels recognized the basil wall and chef's knives. Comments flooded with shock, then outrage, then a collective detective hunt that pieced together R's chore charts and C's ghost pepper fiasco. View count spiked past 30,000 in 2 hours, nothing viral by TikTok standards, but more than enough to shift sentiment. I ended with a calm statement. If they want the apartment, they can buy me out at market displacement cost. Otherwise, I'll stay, pay my share, and keep my peace. Then I logged off, saved the stream privately, and emailed links to Megan and Carlos with a concise offer: $600 to $850 relocation stipend by next Friday, or I assume full lease, and they walk away. Sunday, they tried counterattacking. Megan posted a tearful reel claiming I staged the sprinkler event. Carlos uploaded a rant about sabotage. Unfortunately for them, my tenants' union appearance dropped the same afternoon. The Stranger article followed Monday morning. Influencer couple faces tenant rights backlash. After kitchen fire, Screen captures of Carlos ignoring smoke detector warnings made sabotage look absurd. Sponsors began freezing contracts. Megan's following started peppering her plant tutorials with eviction law questions she couldn't answer. The pressure cooker hissed. By Tuesday night, the landlord sent a group email pay deposit and damages or vacate by month's end, plus potential legal action for continued lease breaches. I replied, all confirming I was prepared to cover my portion immediately. Megan and Carlos, now juggling brand damage and looming legal fees, fell silent for 13 tense hours. Then, at 7 a.m. Wednesday, a simple message arrived. We accept your buyout terms. I forwarded the agreement template, scheduled a notary session, and alerted the landlord. Phase 1 complete. Phase 2 was cleanup, securing witness signatures, transferring utility accounts solely to my name, and ensuring their final footage couldn't spin a defamatory edit. I consulted a media law friend, drafted a cease and desist for any misrepresentation, and queued it in my outbox just in case. Finally, I ordered celebratory takeout pho from my favorite spot on Broadway and ate it in the quiet of a basil-scented living room, quiet because I'd unplugged every last ring light. The plan was working, but I knew victory wouldn't feel real until their last moving van pulled away and the lease amendment ink dried. Still, for the first time in weeks, I breathed without counting decibels, and that breath tasted like something close to freedom. The next 48 hours played out like a speed run of every renter's fantasy and every influencer's nightmare, and I orchestrated it all from the command center of my standing desk while Kubernetes pods rolled in the background. First came the money. Megan wired the full $600 to $850 relocation stipend to my escrow account at 9:12 a.m. Thursday, right after a brand manager emailed her a pause on partnership notice that leaked to Reddit within minutes. I forwarded proof of funds to the landlord and to a mobile notary named Kendra, who met us that afternoon in the echoing lobby of our building. Kendra's presence alone was a psychological masterstroke. Nothing says final like a stranger in a blazer sliding stamped documents across polished marble. Carlos arrived late, eyes ringed from an all-night live-stream apology tour that bled followers instead of winning them back. He tried one last power flex, claiming the printer in our unit belonged to him, and he'd be taking it today. I handed him the Amazon receipt with my name on it, and politely suggested he focus on items that were actually his, like the cracked sauté pan he'd destroyed. Kendra cleared her throat. Signatures flowed. Lease amendment done. Release of liability done. Cease and desist draft acknowledged. By 4 p.m., the landlord had countersigned, officially granting me sole tenancy effective the first of the month. Mini climax 1 achieved. Next came the move out. Influencer couples cannot simply hire movers and disappear. They need content. So Friday morning, while I sipped coffee in my now glitch-free Wi-Fi bubble, Megan launched a sustainable moving day livestream. Her ring lights returned, but the chat scrolled with tenant law references and basil wilt jokes, drowning the curated positivity. I'd filed a building management request reserving the freight elevator from 8 a.m. to noon, a courtesy she'd forgotten. When the movers arrived at 10, they discovered no elevator slot, no loading dock permit, and a brand new rule from the landlord. All oversized items must exit through the alley to protect common areas after the sprinkler damage. Cue meltdown on camera. Carlos jogged down 4 flights with his knife roll rattling, only to find the alley blocked by a compost pickup, a schedule I'd known because I subscribed to the city's waste management calendar. He tried to slip the driver cash. The driver laughed and kept compacting mulch. Mini climax 2. Noon hit and the freight elevator became mine by reservation. I glided past the livestream chaos, wheeling a single dolly of my own boxes, mostly cables and reference books, to demonstrate just how little space I truly occupied. Chat exploded with Taylor's alleged memes. Megan's smile cracked. She whipped out a final card, the sofa set she claimed gave her moral seniority. Unfortunately for her claim, the lease listed all fixtures and large furnishings as joint property unless specifically itemized. The sofa was not. I offered to buy it at market rate minus depreciation. She refused. The landlord copied on every email chain ruled it must stay until ownership could be proven. The movers wrapped it in plastic anyway. Security blocked them at the lobby. Carlos cursed. Cameras captured everything. Chat tallied rule violations in real time. Mini Climax 3. By sunset, the couple had managed to haul half their life into a rental van, but the basal wall still glowed defiantly, root pumps humming LEDs bleeding pink across the empty living room. If removed without a certified electrician, it risked wall damage and another lease violation. Megan begged for one extra day. I agreed on one condition: she sign a written acknowledgement that any physical damage or utility overages linked to dismantling the garden would be deducted from her security deposit. Under the gaze of her own live stream, she signed. Saturday morning, 2 exhausted influencers clipped wires, drained nutrient tanks, and watched their pride wilt into yard waste bags while I updated my spreadsheet column: repairs likely charged to M&C. Mini Climax 4. At 3 p.m., they rolled the last suitcase down the corridor. I walked with them far enough to lock the door behind us, then extended a hand, half courtesy, half closure. Carlos ignored it. Megan accepted, but couldn't meet my eyes. In the hush that followed the elevator's ding, I felt not triumph, but an unexpected calm, like finishing a marathon you never meant to run. And yet one element of my plan remained public perception. Their channels had hemorrhaged sponsorships, but retained sizable audiences hungry for resolution. Rather than gloat, I uploaded a 10-minute follow-up titled "How to End a Lease Dispute Without Losing Your Mind." No names, no blame, just legal resources, spreadsheet templates, and a calm walkthrough of RCW 59-18. The video gained 50,000 views in a day and earned me a guest spot invitation from a civic podcast on housing justice. Sponsors none, and that was the point. I wasn't selling cookware. I was selling clarity. Sunday evening, I performed the ritual I'd been denied for months, cooked a quiet dinner, simple garlic butter pasta without a camera in sight. The basil, I salvaged a handful of healthy stems from the wreckage, rooted them in mason jars, and set them on the windowsill where Megan's grow lights once blazed. Real sunlight, real growth. In the gentle clatter of my own utensils, I heard the soft click of a chapter closing. Yet beneath the satisfaction lingered a question. What happens when peace is no longer defined by resistance, but by what you build afterward? That answer would unfold soon enough. But as I twirled pasta and clicked send on my final utility transfer form, one truth settled: deep spreadsheets may win battles, but boundaries win freedom. The first Monday after Megan and Carlos rolled away in their dented rental van, dawn broke over Capitol Hill, quiet enough that I could hear gulls circling Pike Place from my bedroom window, a sound normally drowned by ring light fans and trial blender whirs. I brewed coffee, opened the balcony door, and waited for the inevitable fallout. But all I felt was a curious lightness, as if the square footage itself exhaled. That stillness didn't last long. At 8:03 a.m., a push notification pinged from the stranger influencer pair: vacates apartment after tenant rights showdown, landlord confirms lease transfer. The article was balanced, almost generous, but the comment section was a bonfire. Some roasted me for weaponizing clout, others crowned me patron saint of quiet renters. I resisted the urge to refresh. Consequence number 1, public narrative had officially tilted in my favor, but narratives are fickle. I'd learned that during the weeks of digital crossfire, so I let the fire burn without tossing and kindling. Instead, I turned to the practical wreckage. The landlord scheduled a walkthrough at noon, clipboard in hand, cheeks still pink from the sprinkler fiasco he'd had to explain to his insurer. We cataloged damages: scorched cabinet finish, hairline cracks, and backsplash tile warped laminate near the fridge where nutrient solution had pooled. Total cost landed just north of $4,000. He deducted every cent from Megan's deposit and shared the invoice with me for transparency. I filed it in my ever-growing folder of evidence you might need someday. Consequence number 2, financial accountability secure. Within 48 hours, a process server attempted to deliver small claims paperwork to Megan's new address, but she'd listed a UPS mailbox instead of an apartment. Classic rookie dodge. The server documented the failed delivery and handed the folder to Carlos on camera during one of his Rebuilding Our Life cooking streams. The clip went viral on our public freakout, and overnight, the couple's sympathy meter flatlined. Sponsors didn't just pause, they canceled. Consequence number 3, career impact locked. I felt a twinge of guilt watching their sub counts slide. Schadenfreude is a cheap high. So I channeled that energy into something constructive, converting the former Basel wall outlet into a proper Ethernet hub for my expanding freelance contracts. Liberation isn't just absence of conflict, it's presence of opportunity. And opportunity arrived fast. The Civic podcast appearance dropped the following Friday, an hour-long conversation about digital evidence renter solidarity and why keeping receipts matters more than keeping calm. The episode topped their download chart for 2 weeks and nudged a nonprofit tech firm to offer me a part-time role building an open-source tool for tracking lease compliance. Higher income, meaningful work, flexible hours consequence. Number 4. Personal growth blossomed like those rescued basil cuttings now thriving on real sunlight. Meanwhile, the Seattle Tenants Union's live stream replayed across community groups, sparking calls for stricter guest limit enforcement and clearer guidelines on commercial filming in residential units. City Council aides reached out for background. I supplied anonymized datasets stripped of names but rich in wattage spikes and decibel peaks. Policy may move glacially, yet knowing my ordeal could nudge better protections felt like the cleanest revenge of all. Consequence number 5, systemic ripple initiated. Yet every victory has shadows. A rogue faction of Megan's old followers launched a smear microblog alleging I'd forged documents. It gained traction for a day before a paralegal friend drafted a defamation warning. The blog vanished overnight, but the lesson lingered: digital footprints never fully fade. I tightened privacy settings across every platform, enabled two-factor on accounts I'd ignored, and ordered a locking mailbox for good measure. Freedom requires maintenance. Emotionally, liberation unfolded in layers. The first layer was silence, coming home to an apartment that smelled like nothing but fresh paint and sunlight. The second was agency cooking dinner whenever hunger struck, not when cameras wrapped. The third was something deeper, unlearning the micro-defensiveness that months of low-level hostility had wired into my muscles. No more reflexively photographing every dirty dish as future evidence. I began evenings by leaving my phone face down, trusting that piece no longer needed documentation. Liberation is a skill, and I was rusty. Then came the unexpected reaction from my own social circles. Friends who had quietly muted the chaos re-emerged with invitations to hiking trips, game nights, even a co-working retreat on Orcas Island. They said they'd waited because they didn't want to be pulled into influencer fallout. Hearing that hurt a little. I'd thought I shielded them, but it also underscored how conflict radiates beyond square footage. I accepted the invites, promising myself that next time I'd call for backup earlier. Consequence number 6, relationship recalibration set. Finally, there was Megan's garden, or what remained. The nutrient-stained concrete looked bleak, yet the city's fall planting season neared. I ordered cedar planters, organic soil, and heirloom seeds, determined to reclaim that patch of earth on my own terms. Neighbors peeked over the fence as I hammered boxes together. One offered tomato, starts another a spare hose. Community unfolds fastest when conflict recedes. By the time the first frost brushed the hills, green shoots dotted the once soggy yard. That living proof of renewal dwarfed any lingering bitterness. In a strange twist, Carlos's viewers noticed the sprouts in the background of my follow-up tenant rights videos and asked for gardening tips. I answered politely. Bridges don't always need burning. Consequence number 7, transformation sprouted. And yet, as winter lights began to flick across Seattle's skyline, I sensed the story wasn't quite finished. Megan and Carlos still owed damages beyond the deposit. Court dates loomed. The landlord hinted at selling the building in the spring. Each outcome could flip my newfound stability overnight. So I updated my spreadsheets, but this time not out of fear, out of habit, like sharpening tools you hope you won't need. Part of me almost welcomed the challenge. After all, boundaries once learned scale nicely. As I locked the door that evening, pasta simmering on the stove and basil perfume in the air, a quiet conviction took root. The real consequence of surviving a siege isn't vengeance or headlines. It's the unshakable knowledge that you can protect your space and still keep your humanity intact. Tomorrow would bring whatever twists city life had queued up, but tonight I owned the lease, the narrative, and the calm, and that trinity felt lighter than any victory dance I could have streamed. Now, with the dust settled and lessons crystallized, it was time to share those takeaways. Time to turn a personal win into a blueprint anyone could use. Surviving a roommate coup taught me that power in a rental isn't charisma followers or even cash. It's documentation plus boundaries enforced early and often. Keep every receipt log each guest night, and don't let maybe next time replace a clear yes or no. I also learned that public narrative is a tide. Push it with facts, not fury, and it will eventually flow where truth points. More broadly, our little war mirrors a bigger American tension creators turning private space into profit arenas while housing costs shove ordinary tenants to the edge. Until policy and culture catch up, renters must be their own compliance departments, armed with state statutes, community support, and a camera of their own when necessary. Yet winning shouldn't harden you. The real victory was letting go of paranoia once the threat was gone, choosing seedlings over spite, and meeting neighbors in the sunlight instead of fighting shadows under ring lights. That choice is repeatable everywhere. A lease hangs in fragile balance. As for what's next, the landlord just hinted a sale may hit the market this spring. If investors bite, I'll face a fresh round of uncertainty, maybe a rent spike, maybe a buyout offer, maybe a chance to crowdfund and turn this apartment into a co-op pilot. I don't know which path will unfold, and honestly, that open question feels right. A story rooted in city life should end with the city still humming challenges, queued possibilities wide. Now it's your turn. Have you navigated a roommate standoff, or are you staring one down right now? Drop your tactics and cautionary tales in the comments. Someone scrolling at 2 a.m. might need exactly your advice. If this saga lit a bulb over your head, hit like so the algorithm knows tenant knowledge matters. Subscribe for future deep dives into housing hacks, conflict resolution tech, and maybe a time lapse of my heirloom tomatoes if you're into that sort of piece. Share the video with a friend who thinks month to month means do whatever you want. And remember, rent may be due monthly, but respect is due daily, and both require receipts. Until next time, keep your spreadsheets tight, your plants watered, and your boundaries non-negotiable. Story 2. Erin is my name. Everyone in my family used to refer to me as the trustworthy one, and I'm currently 29. You are aware of the kind. The person who never fails to show up. Repairs the mess no one else wants to tackle, picks up the slack, and pays the bill when someone forgets their money. I carried that title like a badge of honor for a long time. I saw reliability as a positive trait. However, that dependability eventually evolved into an expectation. Then duty, then something more repulsive. It turned into a leash. My birthday last year was the culmination of it all. It's my 29th. Not much. A simple family meal at my parents' place. Mom prepared her lasagna as usual. My sister brought her 2 children and let them run amok while acting as though they didn't exist. And my brother Nate arrived late carrying a bottle of wine and his typical arrogant demeanor. He most likely stole from a customer. Nate's signature move. Despite having a bank account that has never had more than 3 figures and a rotating door of jobs, he is still treated like the golden child even though he is 4 years younger than me. In the meantime, I had a steady job that paid off my vehicle, my condo, and the best part, I had been discreetly paying my parents' expenses for the previous 3 years. They never made direct inquiries. After Dad's business reached a hard stretch, it began with a special moment that was exclusive for this month. Next came the utilities, followed by the mortgage. Then, all of a sudden, I was responsible for shopping repairs and even covering for Nate when he made a mistake again. And since I believed I was being helpful, I did it in silence. Because I reasoned that someone needed to take the initiative. But something broke that night. As usual, the evening got off to a good start, if a little stressful. Nate's tie was the source of my mom's complaint. When Dad made one of his many jokes about how I was still unmarried because I worked too hard, he hadn't even put one on. As usual, I dismissed it with a chuckle. The cake followed. Anyway, it was store-bought. I grinned despite their halting and generally out-of-tune rendition of Happy Birthday. May he never disappear, Dad remarked to Aaron as he lifted his glass. Otherwise there wouldn't be anyone left to clean up our mess. The table laughed. Then he included it. I can still hear that sentence in my mind. You wouldn't be missed if you vanished tomorrow. I felt like I was slapped by the words. However, I was horrified by the response. Nate chuckled. Mum remained silent, simply nodded and grinned as if it were a joke she had heard before. No one even blinked when my niece inquired what gone meant. I gazed at them. My own household. I had been providing emotional, financial, and mental assistance to these folks for a number of years. They were giggling as if I were a joke. As if I were unimportant. Before anyone saw I hadn't cut the cake, I quickly excused myself and walked out of the home. On that night, I didn't weep. I didn't hurl objects or shout. For 2 hours, I sat in solitude in my car. I learned more from that stillness than I ever could have from their words. I carried on with my life as if nothing had happened for the following 2 weeks. The power bill was still paid by me. Mom's credit card was still insured. Venmo is still in use. When Nate texted me a bunch of garbage about not having enough money for rent. However, I also began making plans in secret. I realized something, so I proceeded with caution. I wasn't taken for granted by them. They were reliant on me. I was required by them. However, I didn't require them. The next Sunday, I skipped Sunday supper. I disregarded Mom's passive-aggressive text message that said, "Miss you." Nate sent an emoji of laughter. Elegant. I didn't answer. The next week, I purposefully neglected to deliver the water bill payment. Confused, they phoned. I said that this month I was short on funds. The first ripple was that. The following time Dad phoned, I let the voicemail go. It was 30 seconds of silence followed by a sigh and a piercing sound when I listened to it later. Aaron, give me a call when you can. Just an order, no apologies. I changed my phone number 2 weeks later. After that, I quit my job. I had saved a good deal of money over the years. I had always led a humble life. No extravagant spending or trips, simply a peaceful existence and a slowly increasing money account. Tucked away was a little more than $180,000. By the end of the month, I liquidated some investments and sold my condo. I was debt-free and had just under $250,000. I located a little village out west that I had been to on a lone hike. Calm. Keep quiet. Separated. I packed up. Disappeared after signing a lease under a different name. No, farewell. Not a word. Simply gone. I erased all traces of their internet presence. I deactivated my old email, erased my social media accounts, and terminated all of the accounts connected to the bills. I also observed. Not intentionally. Well, mainly out of curiosity, but perhaps a bit. I wanted to see how long it would take them to realize that I was the foundation of the world they were leaning on. About 3 weeks later, my mother phoned my previous employer and discovered that I had quit, which was the first indication. A series of frantic emails with subject lines like, "Please call urgent," and "We're worried," then started to arrive at my old address. Most of them were not read by me. Then Nate arrived. In fact, he messaged one of my former college pals to check up on me, told him that the family was worried and that I had stopped talking. My friend was more aware. He assured them that I was busy but okay. The urgency quickly increased. There was no payment for the mortgage. The utilities were turned off. Dad's pride prevented him from telling the broader family anything. They just informed everyone that I was on a business trip. They were actually drowning. Nate had no funds to compensate them for their losses. The credit card of Mum began to bounce. For the first time, they were unable to pay the medical costs when Dad had a little health scare. They had to turn to the very family members they had been silently criticizing for years for assistance. And me. I sipped coffee on a terrace with a view of the mountains in the morning. I took long walks. I'm a book reader. For the first time in 10 years, I breathed. But that tranquility would not endure indefinitely. Because something occurred around a month later. Something that, whether I liked it or not, drew me straight back into their circle. I was standing there with someone I never thought I would see when they knocked on my new door. Jenna, my cousin, was there. Now let me back up before I tell you how she discovered me. The only member of our extended family with whom I had ever truly clicked was Jenna. We weren't close. However, she consistently treated me as though I were more than just a wallet. She asked, "How are you?" in a certain way. Did that give you the impression that she was really curious? But it had been years since we had spoken. She got married, had a child, lived her life, and relocated to Oregon for graduate school. I wasn't sure if I should be shocked or strangely moved when she unexpectedly appeared at my door. She seemed worn out, not in a bodily sense. It's more akin to the emotional exhaustion that sticks to your bones. She murmured, "Erin," taking a step back as if she wasn't even certain I would allow her in. I apologize for my appearance. There was nowhere else for me to go. I blinked. "Jen? How did you—" She said I didn't. "Not at all. However, I recalled you discussing this place on your visit years ago. I guessed." For 2 weeks, every rental home in the neighborhood was contacted, until someone brought up a quiet man who paid the entire year's rent in cash. I nearly burst out laughing, but I was stopped by her expression. This was no ordinary visit. "What's happening?" I moved aside to let her in and asked. Glancing around as if the place was too serene for what she was going to say, she entered slowly. We took a seat. I made tea. She left it alone. "They're losing everything." At last, she said, "Your folks, Nate. The home is in foreclosure. Last week, utilities were turned off. Your father suffered from a panic attack, refused to visit the hospital due to financial constraints. Nate put your old gaming computer on. They are in disarray." I remained silent. "Everyone was informed that you had a breakdown." "You just snapped," she added. "Disappeared, that they're worried sick." I almost laughed again, but it came out dry and bitter. Of course they are. No one left to pay for their mistakes. Jenna didn't argue. She didn't stand up for them. I let her remain because of it. She just said, nodding slowly. I assumed that was the case. After sitting in that stillness for a while, I eventually said, "Jenna, why are you really here?" For the first time, I noticed a glimmer of doubt beneath the stillness as she glanced up at me. "Because I kind of hoped you'd want to know, and because they're afraid." I didn't answer. She seemed to be attempting to meet me halfway by leaning forward a little. "I'm not requesting that you repair it, Erin. They certainly don't deserve it. However, I felt that you ought to hear it from someone who had no expectations." At that point, she gave the envelope to me. It was written in my mother's hand and addressed to me. It's the same handwriting I used to write on my childhood birthday cards and school lunch bags. My stomach twisted at the sight of it. I didn't open it. The guest room was where Jenna spent the night. I didn't offer to speak with her in the morning, and she didn't pressure me to read it. She thanked me for the bed and for not slamming the door in her face as she softly walked out. I spent hours sitting with that envelope after she went. I flipped it over in my hands, gazed at the seal, and reflected on all the memories that had brought me to this moment. The dinners I prepared, the birthdays I paid for, and the late hours spent assisting Nate with crises. The time at that table when my dad nonchalantly deleted me while everyone laughed. I took it open. The handwritten letter was 2 pages long, unsteady, sentimental. The manner in which someone writes out of fear of the repercussions rather than out of sincere remorse. We don't know what occurred, Aaron. You were there 1 second and then you were gone. No messages, no farewell. We're afraid. Are you all right? Your dad has been ill. Without you, Nate is lost. It wasn't until everything started to come apart that we realized how much you were holding together. Tell us where you are, please. If anything we stated offended you, we apologize. That night, we were only making jokes. Your dad is like that, you know. He never intends to do it. He is missing you. Everyone does. Come home, please. Simply speak with us. Mom love. No word of responsibility was heard. Nothing about what was stated in reality. Just a general, ambiguous apology. You are missed. We didn't intend it either. Just dread no ownership. I refrained from crying. I put the letter in a drawer after folding it back into the envelope. I had an odd sense of serenity in my chest as I went to bed that night. I came to a significant realization. They weren't lamenting my passing. The loss of their safety net was something they were lamenting. The weeks that followed went by in silence. No fresh mail, no new guests. However, I monitored. Observed from a distance. Jenna updated me from time to time. They briefly moved in with my aunt. Nate attempted to start a GoFundMe by saying that their breadwinner had disappeared. It hardly brought in enough money to buy groceries for a week. After then, something occurred that even I didn't anticipate. Jenna gave me a call one morning. She replied, "You must see this. Examine your previous email." I logged onto the email I hadn't checked in months and forwarded something. The one they most likely thought I had left behind. And there it was, Nate's email. The heading, "Aaron, you owe us." For a long time, I gazed at the subject line. "Aaron, you owe us" words. Like a splinter, each one digs into my flesh. Uncertain whether I was amused, furious, or simply numb. At this point, I click the email open. "I don't know where you went or what your problem is, but this is getting out of hand, guy. Since you abandoned everyone, we've gone through difficult times. I'm doing everything I can to keep things together here while Mom and Dad are barely surviving. It was you that kept things going. Everything was paid for by you. That was your responsibility. You weren't asked to take responsibility. You simply were. Therefore, don't be upset with us now for depending on you. You're to blame for it. It's okay if you believe that vanishing makes a point. You've succeeded. Come back now and mend what you damaged. The least you can do is this, following all that we have done for you. We are related. Nate, that still has some meaning." I read the last line again. We are related. Isn't that still significant? I laughed aloud at something about it. This hollow, dry laugh reverberated through my small, silent cabin's walls. They were still unable to grasp it. They sincerely feel that I have wronged them by ceasing to provide financial support for their lives, and that they are the victims in this situation. I didn't respond. Rather, I closed the laptop, saved the email in a folder called Delusions, and took a stroll. At that time of day, the trails behind the cabin were serene. Sunlight peeking through the trees is golden, a background of birdsong. The slight sound of leaves crunching beneath my boots. I inhaled the calm, the type of silence I had never experienced as a child growing up in a home full of demands, yelling complaints, and the incessant echo of, "Aaron will handle it," as I was walking. The tone, the entitlement, the way Nate turned my departure into betrayal as if I had some obligation etched on my forehead from birth made me keep reading his email. Was it your job? Like a bell I couldn't unring, it echoed in my ears. No, no more. I tried to ignore it, but I had a gut feeling that something was changing. The game was evolving. They were no longer just disorganized and fumbling. They were irate, desperate, and entitled all at once. That combination is risky. The emails continued to pour in over the next few days, not only from Nate. "Please think about the family" is the title of the lengthy one my mother sent. It was filled with allusions to my early years and hazy guilt trips. Text like, "Remember how we always helped with your science fairs, and this family has already endured enough." I didn't remove it. Along with the others, I archived it. Then my father's letter arrived. Real physical mail was dispatched this time under my previous name to the local post office in the hopes that it would find its way to me. I had no idea how he had discovered the town. Perhaps Jenna had made a mistake, or perhaps he made a guess. One typed page of paper was inside the envelope. No sign-off, no hello. "We're being punished by you. I understand, but more than anything else, you're punishing your mother. This is not fair to her." I said something that night that I didn't mean. I found it amusing. "You had a sense of humor once. You're exaggerating. We require assistance. You either belong to this family or you don't." I was struck by that final phrase. You either belong to this family or you don't. It was dangerous. Not covert, not nuanced. Simply a crude form of emotional blackmail. This type of comment is made by someone who believes they still have control over you. However, they didn't. Because I was no longer Aaron in the same way. I continued waiting for the next move, though, and it arrived sooner than I thought it would. While shopping for groceries, I became aware of a follower. At first, nothing was immediately apparent. Every aisle I went to had a man who lingered a bit too long. He was someone I had never seen. A man in his late 30s who is wiry, buzz-cut, bland apparel. You'd pass that unmemorable visage a dozen times and never notice it. However, he was obviously not buying as I turned down a row for the third time and noticed him there gazing at cereal. My neck's back hair stood on end. I made a cash payment. Swiftly left. Went home via a different path. Did not proceed directly to the cabin. I turn around and look for stories. Old habits from an uncle who served in the military and was paranoid. I never imagined that I would require them. I finally returned, shut the doors, and took a seat. My heart is racing. It was a bit more difficult than I wanted to acknowledge. I looked at all of my security cameras that evening. Nothing unusual. However, I once more changed my passwords. I transferred funds to another account and turned off the primary Wi-Fi. There was an impending event. I sensed it, and I was correct, because there was a knock on the door the next morning. However, it wasn't family this time. It was a gray-suited man with papers in his hands. I slowly opened the door without swinging it all the way out. When someone wants to be taken seriously more than they want to be understood, they seem official, like the man in the gray suit. Sharp-eyed in his mid-40s with a business card in one hand and a leather folder in the other. Aaron Caldwell. "Mr. Despite his obvious certainty," he inquired. I took a while to respond. My instincts were tightly wound. "I work at Kessler and Tate, a law business. On behalf of your family, I'm here." He held the packet out to me. I refused to accept it. A lawyer was engaged by my family. They submitted a claim. He spoke without showing any signs of discomfort. "They are claiming both illegally withholding family support and financial desertion." In fact, I burst out laughing. I was unable to resist. "Does that even exist?" He shrugged slightly like a lawyer. "They contend that you had a lengthy history of financial responsibility and that your sudden disappearance caused quantifiable loss, giving them the right to sue for civil damages." Now I took the folder more out of shock than interest. I leafed over the paperwork. It was in black and white there. My parents' remarks on decades of caregiving, an unwritten family contract, and a failure to fulfill obligations to dependents, as well as Nate's name. I was being sued by them for failing to pay their expenses. The attorney paused for a bit. The court date is listed, but you're not required to respond right now, he added. You'll want to be represented. I'm under no obligation to take any action. I returned the folder with a mumble. I'll see them in court, tell them. He nodded professionally, turned and walked away. For a moment, the early breeze coiled around me like a warning as I stood still. Thus, this was their final strategy. Not a discussion. It's not an apology. Litigation. That's when I realized this had to stop. Not only in terms of the law, not alone by filing a countersuit. It had to be over. They were giving me the gift of clarity after demonstrating to me who they were and had always been. For the majority of my adult life, I had thought that love required sacrifice. That family was a symbol of perseverance. They had told them so, however. Family meant obedience, and love meant control. And I was finished. I wasted no time. I engaged my own attorney, Reese, an astute, direct lady with experience in family law who dislikes emotional coercion. She really rolled her eyes and muttered, "You've got to be kidding me. After reading their case, this wouldn't stand up in a real court, much less one on reality TV." We were still ready. We kept records on everything. Every bank statement demonstrating the mortgage payments that had been deducted from my account, every wire transfer, every receipt, and every text message from Nate requesting money. We made a comprehensive chronology. 7 years of silent, consistent, and evidence-based financial assistance. Not because I had to ethically defend myself. We had to shut this down so completely that they wouldn't dare do it again, even though I already knew I'd done more than my fair share. We appeared before a court 2 months later. In fact, they arrived, the 3 of them. Despite seeming thinner than I recalled, my father maintained a proud demeanor. His eyes were the same steel. My mum seemed worn out and exhausted. Nate. He appeared arrogant, as though this were his lucky charm. I pondered whether he had already spent any anticipated compensation in his mind. As the judge flipped over the case file, the courtroom fell silent. Then Reese got up. Your Honor, she didn't hold back when she stated that the plaintiff's claim is predicated on the notion that legal responsibility is equivalent to familial commitment. That's only because my customer voluntarily and unconditionally offered help. He is now legally and financially obligated to keep doing so. However, there is no co-signed loan, no power of attorney, no contract, and no agreement. Only decades of kindness paid back with entitlement. When my father's turn came, she turned in our more than 100-page documentation. He made an emotional effort to frame it. It's not only about the money, Your Honor. It has to do with treachery. A cornerstone of our family was my son. We were left to pick up the pieces after his sudden disappearance. Once more we stood. And just where was this feeling of belonging? On his birthday, Mr. Caldwell was informed that his disappearance would not be missed. The judge held up a hand as my father attempted to speak again. I've had enough. He turned to face my parents. I'm prejudicedly rejecting the case. Mr. Caldwell is not required by law to assist you. Generosity in money does not equate to legal obligation. And to be honest, the manipulation at the center of this case disturbs this court. He then faced me. I hope you realize that you had the right to go, Mr. Caldwell. I gave one nod. Now I do. The sound of the gavel falling reverberated outside the courtroom like the last door slamming. It was their final attempt. Mom came running after me. Hold on, Aaron, please. We had no idea it would go to this point. We were only afraid. The lady who had once served me soup when I was ill, kissed my forehead goodnight when I was 7, and sat quietly as I was assured I wouldn't be missed, was the one I turned to gaze at. I answered, I believe you, but fear does not excuse your actions. It didn't. Nate's mouth opened. However, I held out a hand. Don't. Simply don't. I turned to go. It was more than a year ago. I've rebuilt my life on my own terms ever since. The hut where I reside is still the same. Continue to trek those paths. After finishing that book, I began teaching coding online part-time. Every time I promised to write. It's not about family or retaliation, it's about discovering your identity on your own when no one else is telling you. Since then, I have not heard from them. I ponder about that birthday supper sometimes. The smugness, the laughs, the way they viewed my life as a waste. Then I consider the present, the quiet, the tranquility. They were correct. I did sort of vanish, and they didn't really miss me at all. However, I also don't miss them, and it tells me I made the correct decision more than anything else. Story 3. Daniel is my name. I am 34 years old, and I own a modest yet profitable home-based software company. I've always been more of an introvert, the type of man who would rather read a nice book and have a quiet meal than attend parties or large gatherings. Megan, my wife, is the exact opposite. Loud and charismatic. The room's lifeblood. For the most part, that contrast was effective for us. However, Sandra, her mother, was the one person with whom we never agreed. I would use the word overbearing to characterize Sandra. The type of woman who is adamant that her viewpoint is not only correct, but also divinely inspired. She won't argue if you confront her. She smiles while gaslighting passive-aggressively. Additionally, she constantly found a way to get into locations when she wasn't welcomed, like as our house or our choices, or our $50,000 trip, as I just found out. It had taken me more than a year to organize that trip. The blue water of Bora Bora is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Bungalow above the lake. Everything has been resolved. I had been secretly saving money by working with travel agencies, including verifying each family member's dietary requirements. Megan, our 2 children. Yes, Sandra, since Megan demanded that she attend. It has been years since she was last seen. According to her, I bit my tongue. All right. If it meant providing my family with a priceless memory, I could put up with her for 10 days. She would behave, I promised myself. I was paying for everything, after all. 3 days before to the trip, fast forward. I heard a phone conversation Megan had put on speaker as I was in the kitchen organizing last-minute details. Her mother was rambling on about how much she was looking forward to seeing Tom once more. I felt sick to my stomach. Megan's former lover from college, Tom, was her ex. Sandra continued to follow him on Facebook and called him such a catch for some reason. I tried to speak calmly as I entered the room gently. Why does she bring up Tom? After a moment of seeming shocked, Megan attempted to dismiss it. Oh, she just meant that she had asked him to join her for supper when we returned. Not a huge deal. It was a falsehood. I knew right away. When Megan lies, her voice trembles a little. Hardly perceptible unless you've committed every word she says to memory over the course of 10 years. At the moment, I remained silent. My instinct urged me to verify the guest list with the travel agency, but I didn't press it. My hands were shaking as the agent verified the passenger list, and I can still remember it. According to her, Sandra Miller paid for Tom Thomas E. Colton's reservation on the same airline and bungalow cluster. But connected to your reservation. I had a tunneling vision. Without notifying me, this woman invited my wife's ex-boyfriend to the family vacation I had paid for, and she somehow persuaded herself that was perfectly okay. I didn't immediately confront anyone. I needed time to plan and think. I didn't want to blow out and turn like the crazy spouse. I began to observe and listen because I needed leverage, and I was infuriated by what I discovered. Tom wasn't the only one Sandra invited. He was to stay in the bungalow next to ours as she had arranged. It was a small surprise, she told Megan. For her side, Megan says she was incensed to learn that she even attempted to have it canceled, but it turns out Sandra had already paid a portion of it herself. However, Megan didn't tell me, so I wasn't persuaded. None of it was ever discussed by her. Not until I discovered it for myself. I continued to act calm. At the dinner table, I grinned. As if nothing had happened, I carried on packing. I was asked often if I was excited about Megan. Absolutely. With a smile, I would say. I'm eager to create memories. In the meanwhile, I started to covertly dissect everything behind the scenes. I first had my share of the deposit refunded after contacting the travel agent. I informed them that I was canceling my family's reservation due to an emergency. I didn't completely call off the trip. No, I did not alter the reservations. I just moved my money to another location. I then booked a separate room someplace entirely different for myself and the children. Somewhere quiet. No drama, no Sandra. I kept it a secret. Not the children, not Megan, not even my closest pal. I wanted the quiet to be painful. Then it occurred the night before leaving. Our bags were arranged at the front entrance while we sat in the living room. Sandra arrived early, naturally. With that smug expression she usually had when she felt she was getting her way, she drank her tea and glanced about. Then, as if it were the most casual thing ever, she turned to face me. For nostalgia's sake, I felt it would be good to invite Tom. He had a significant role in Megan's life. I assumed the children would also like meeting him. I looked at her for quite a while. Megan avoided looking at me. My daughter froze in mid-step, and my son looked up from his tablet. I grinned. Yes, absolutely. I spoke quietly. I love a good surprise. I allowed the quiet to linger. Sandra's smile wavered slightly, and I saw it happen. Although Megan appeared perplexed, I could see her guilt growing. I excused myself, entered the bedroom, and snapped a picture of the updated reservation information. Forward it to my email. After that, I shut down the app, went back outside, and sat next to my children. I kissed them both and tucked them in that evening. Good night. We're going on an adventure tomorrow, I whispered. Just the three of us. My daughter blinked. What about Mommy? I smiled and said she's got a different kind of trip planned. Megan and Sandra stayed up late that night, laughing, sipping wine. At one point, I heard Sandra say Tom is going to flip when he sees Megan in a bikini. I stopped listening after that. I didn't want to hear anymore. At exactly 5:15 a.m., I slipped out of bed, packed my bag, and gently woke the kids. I left a letter taped to the bathroom mirror addressed to Megan. No yelling, no accusations. Just the truth laid out plainly. And a reminder when you let someone else invite ghosts into your marriage. Don't be surprised when the living walk away. And as we boarded our early flight to the Maldives with the sun rising behind us, I took one last look at my phone and turned it off completely. They could deal with whatever upheaval was ahead without me. At first, the trip to the Maldives was peaceful. The children were still half sleeping, nestled into the center seats and window wearing headphones and neck pillows. I tried to quiet the turmoil in my breast as I sat in the aisle seat and watched the clouds move beneath us. I had lost my anger, not in the yelling, flinging manner I had anticipated. It burned more slowly and steadily, managed, measured. I had no desire for vengeance, in the sense of a cartoon antagonist. I had no intention of destroying lives. I simply wanted to stop being treated like an idiot. Or worse, as if my own marriage didn't matter. I continued thinking about all the minor warning signs that I had ignored over the years, including Sandra's constant bringing up of Tom during family meals and Megan's refusal to reprimand her. How even after being married to me for over 10 years, she still kept old pictures of them in her mother's hallway. Megan would shrug it off and claim that her mother was simply being strange. Don't be upset about it. And I didn't. Years passed as I gulped. Sandra's passive remarks such as, Tom always helped with the dishes, or Tom would have loved this vacation spot, made me uncomfortable, so I bit my tongue. She was simply mired in the past, I reminded myself. That I was adored by Megan. That we were stable. I couldn't get rid of the thought that I had been blind, though, as I stared at my sleeping children with my entire existence back in flux, or even overly lenient. And I wasn't going to continue to bear the emotional and financial consequences. The children cheered as we arrived in Mali. My daughter's face brightened like Christmas morning as soon as we got into the private boat that the resort had provided for us. In my experience, the water had the purest blue color. I chose the Maldives not just for its beauty, but also for its remoteness and inaccessibility. The sort of location where what's going on outside seems like a rumor. When we arrived at the bungalow hours and there were no unwelcome visitors in the adjacent room, I had an odd feeling. It had been weeks since I felt relief. No tension, no drama. All I could hear were the waves and my children laughing as they sprinted around the rooms vying for beds. The texts began on the second day. I had switched on my phone for a quick Wi-Fi check-in with work. Curiosity won over, even though I hadn't intended to read anything else. There were more than 50 missed messages in the family group chat. Megan sent the first one. "What's going on, Daniel?" The reservation was canceled, according to the hotel. "This is Thomas. My mother is going crazy." The following few were a mixture of bewilderment and terror. I didn't bother to open the voicemail Sandra sent. Then Megan added another. "Tell me you didn't really leave, please. This is crazy. You are behaving like a kid." That one almost made me chuckle. After what they did, it was childish. Then came the section that gave me a little indigestion. "Where are the children? You really took them and didn't inform me." "Daniel, this is not acceptable." Gazing at the message, I let out a sigh. I wasn't proud of how abruptly I interrupted Megan. I knew this was more than simply the vacation, but I didn't want to be dishonest. Trust was at issue here. She had no money left in the bank at the moment. I responded with one sentence. "They're secure. When I'm ready, I'll go into detail." I then switched the phone off once more. In Bora Bora again. I later learned from friends and relatives that the repercussions had been severe. Sandra hadn't only invited Tom, it turns out. She believed she had used my money to reserve his accommodation. I canceled everything that was in my name. The difference was not covered by her card. If they did not pay in full, the hotel would not let them check in. Tom arrived, anticipating a nice reception, perhaps thinking this was some sort of group reunion, only to see a frantic Sandra and an enraged Megan fighting at the front desk. Their tickets were not refunded by the airline. There was a cancellation fee assessed by the property. Sandra was unaware of Tom's existence. After a furious argument in which Megan referred to him as having a walking midlife crisis, he made reservations for a trip home that same evening. Megan's Instagram story with the description, "Dream trip ruined," was the icing on the cake. "Thank you, Sandra and Mom." She fell silent. Not a single quote regarding Tom. No mysterious posts on Facebook. Radio silence. In the meantime, I did all I could think of during the days in the Maldives. Swimming with my children, eating delicious seafood on the beach, dozing off in hammocks, and watching cheesy movies in bed with them were all planned activities for that trip. It wasn't flawless. There is nothing. However, it was quiet, sincere, away from the cacophony. Megan eventually managed to get in touch with me via the hotel on the 6th day. During breakfast, I was given a note from the front desk. Megan wrote just 5 words in her distinctive calligraphy. "Do not give up on us, please." For a long time, I gazed at the note. I wasn't sure yet if I needed distance or if I wanted a divorce. However, I was unaware of this. I couldn't ignore the boundary Sandra crossed when she brought Tom along on that vacation. And Megan had allowed her to do it by remaining silent. She may or may not have intended to. I turned to see my children using a local guide to build a sand castle. They were giggling. I'm laughing so hard. And for once, my own family story did not include me in the background. I was in the center of it all right there. At that point, I became aware that something had changed within me and at home. 4 days later, when we flew home, that shift was about to send shockwaves. I kept our early return a secret from everyone. We took a covert flight. At 3:40 a.m., a red-eye touched down. I had made arrangements for a car to drive us directly home. It's a short-term rental, not our home. Before the trip, I made a discreet reservation. It was a little but cozy 3-bedroom home on the outskirts of town, tucked away by a lake and surrounded by towering trees. Calm, private, secure. I had no intention of fleeing my marriage, at least not yet. But just because the trip was over didn't mean I was mindlessly returning to the same house with the same issues. Megan had gone too far. She may not have welcomed Tom in person, but she had given in, made it possible. Strike it. Above all, she hadn't prevented it. If the roles had been reversed, I already knew how the conversation would have gone if I had allowed my ex to go on a $50,000 vacation and kept it a secret. There would have been no peace. That morning, I sent her a message. Once we were comfortable with the rental. We've returned. The children are doing well. This weekend, I'll drop them off at the house. She answered almost immediately. You can't simply leave like this. We must speak. Please. It wasn't until the last minute that I realized Mom had invited him. I didn't answer. Not quite yet. I did visit the house that Friday, but not by themselves. I brought Eric, my brother. He practices law. A man of silence. Sharp, but as serene as a glacier. When we first entered, he didn't say anything, but Sandra was silent because of him. Yes, indeed. Sandra was there, sipping a cappuccino and looking through a home decor magazine as if nothing had occurred, sitting in the living room as if she owned the space. Megan was standing close to the hearth. Eyes droopy and exhausted, arms crossed. When I walked in, she reached for me. Could we please chat, Daniel? I'm signaling to go to the kitchen by myself. Sandra laughed at me from behind. I should be there if you're going to accuse my daughter of anything. I interrupted her without looking back. No, you don't. Then we entered the kitchen. It appeared as though Megan hadn't slept since Bora Bora. Her voice faltered. None of this was planned by me. It wasn't until the day before our departure that I even realized Tom was coming. My mother believed it would be pleasant, I said icily, for the sake of the past. She turned her head away. I was the first to know, and you said nothing to me instead. Megan, that's what counts most. You had a chance to defend us. For myself, you didn't either. She nibbled on her lip. Glassy eyes. I did not want the trip to be ruined. Perhaps she would cancel, I thought. She claimed to have covered the cost. She used my itinerary to pay for a portion of my trip before forcing herself to host. You were aware that it was incorrect. You simply didn't want to battle. Between us, the quiet weighed heavily. Not upset, just depressing. Weary. I have no idea how to resolve this, she muttered. Perhaps you don't. I said. I left the kitchen behind. Sandra glanced up, poised to make a sarcastic comment. Eric, however, got up at the same moment and silenced her by removing a folder from his back. I'll be spending the weekend with the children. Flatly, I replied. They will remain with me. Slowly, we're working things out. Megan remained silent. She only gave a nod. Her eyes were filled with tears. I eventually read the envelope Eric left me later that evening after putting the kids to bed in the rental and sitting on the veranda to watch the moon move across the lake. Early drafts of a separation agreement, not a divorce, were contained therein. Just room limits, organization, and above all, protection of my money. I wanted alternatives, but I hadn't decided yet. I desired lucidity. The days that followed were calm. No drama, no Sandra text, no unexpected visitors. Just lazy mornings watching cartoons and eating pancakes. Talking with my children and taking long walks by the lake helped me remember what it was like to be a parent and not simply a financial account. Megan called me on Monday of the next week. I waited for it to ring 3 times before answering. When I told my mother that she was no longer welcome in our home, she responded. She spoke in a hushed, almost embarrassed tone. I didn't want to make things more difficult, but I should have done it years ago. I was afraid about the reaction. I remained silent. I told her that I wanted to make this right, but I knew I would have to show that I meant it. After that, I canceled her keys, modified the code. I'm severing her financial connection. She is enraged. I'm resentful now. However, I no longer give a damn. A lengthy pause ensued. I simply, Daniel, I want us back. Not as it was. Better than it was. As I reclined on the wooden chair, I saw the pine trees soft swaying in the wind. I was hesitant to answer at first because I wasn't sure whether I was ready to forgive. Not quite yet. Perhaps never. However, I became aware of something else as the wind blew gently through the leaves. The stillness didn't seem empty for the first time in years. It had the feel of vastness, genuinely honest space. The sort that might develop into something different, something more powerful, or something else entirely. I still had that option. I took a while to respond to Megan. Not on that call. For the remainder of that day, no. I sat beside it. Leave the words hanging there. The goal was not to discipline her. It was to ensure that I wasn't hastily forgiving someone out of loneliness, fear, or guilt. I had been dismissing things for years and apologizing for emotions I was taught were too delicate, putting up with her mother's persistent interference. I told myself that the conflict wasn't worth it, that maintaining harmony was part of becoming the greater person. However, silence based tranquilly is only pressure. It blows up eventually. I went the entire length of the little dock behind the lake home one night after the kids had gone to sleep, sat on the edge and let my feet hang over the water. I asked myself the true question as I gazed at my reflection in the undulating surface. Do I still have faith in her, not affection? Love is simple, known. The edges are soft. But have faith. Trust is a system. Everything above it becomes unstable as it cracks. Could I work with her to rebuild it? Or had the foundation deteriorated so much that it was irreparable? I gave her another call in the morning. We'll get together. Tomorrow, I answered. Only us. A public setting. Neutral territory. I picked a peaceful cafe on the outskirts of town close to the location of our first actual date when things were easier. Prior to marriage, prior to children. Megan arrived on schedule before Sandra began to consider our relationship as a tryout for her ideal family makeover. She appeared exhausted and emotionally depleted. No big motions, no makeup, only her. For the first time in weeks, we really looked at each other as she sat across from me. I am aware of what I did, she added quietly, or rather didn't. I am aware that I did not defend you. I understand how painful that was. I didn't interrupt. I gave her a chance to speak. In our own lives, I allowed my mother to treat you like a second-class citizen. And I was too afraid of losing her favor to shield you from her. I gave up trying since I didn't think she would ever respect boundaries. However, it wasn't until lately that I realized I had made you feel unimportant by doing that, and I've never done anything worse than that. Even though her eyes were already wet, she chose not to cry or focus on herself. She simply let the stillness to envelop us. I've spoken to a therapist already, she added. 2 times a week I've been going. I'm practicing self-control. How I let myself to be destroyed. How I inflict that harm on you. I am aware that it is not a panacea. This year or today, I don't anticipate your forgiveness. But I'd like to make this right. I wish to regain your confidence, even if it means waiting a long time for the rest of my life. I remained silent. I wanted to express it correctly, not because I was at a loss for words. You didn't just allow your mother to treat me badly. In my own marriage, I remarked, you made me feel alienated. I needed a companion, not someone who would wince if her mother spoke. She answered, I know, and to her credit, she didn't recoil at this point. And whether you intended to or not, you chose to keep quiet over me when she invited Tom. Megan, it was your time. That was the one. You had the option to stop. She said, I wish I had. I leant back in my chair and took a breath each day. I will not return home. Not quite yet. I'm willing to continue meeting, talking, co-parenting, and seeing where this goes, even if it's not for a long. However, Megan, you can't cure it. Before you can assist in rebuilding our borders, you must first rebuild your own. Slowly, she nodded. I get it. Without saying another word, we drained our coffee. It wasn't chilly. It wasn't sour. It was truthful. Perhaps for the first time in a long time. Things progressed slowly over the following 3 months. Consciously. Megan continued to attend treatment. Sandra sent guilt-tripping emails and made a dozen unsuccessful attempts to contact. Following everything I've done for you? No sense. She was blocked by Megan. The locks were changed, even gave back a check. Sandra sent a simple message on the children's birthdays. Something fresh is being built. Please be mindful of our personal space. I had never seen her draw a firm line before. We continued to meet once a week, occasionally more. Sometimes it's just us, and other times it's the kids. We discussed everything. The little things, not simply the vacation, Sandra, or Tom. We would no longer discuss our desires, fears, and missing things. I was aloof at first. Be cautious. Emotionally, I had one foot out the door, but then odd things began to happen. The barrier I had erected to keep myself safe remained intact. It moved, turned into a window. We took another trip 6 months after the Bora Bora tragedy. Nor the Maldives, nor Bora Bora. In the woods, a little hut. 2 hours away. Only the 4 of us. No social media, no phones, and no strangers. Nothing but quiet. Conversations by the fire, board games, and home-cooked dinners. We had a great time, laughing. Every night, my daughter dozed off on my chest. My kid, who had stopped using the moniker months ago, began referring to me as Captain Dad once more. Megan, too. She didn't beg for pardon. She demonstrated it by listening intently, not recoiling in the face of conflict, and not avoiding her mother's name, but refusing to allow it take over the conversation. I moved back in after we got back. As a choice, a decision, rather than as a reward or a restart. The problem is this. Because it shouldn't. Life didn't miraculously return to how it was. The previous iteration of ourselves was unsustainable. We didn't have to return. We had to change. Sandra made another attempt to get in touch, this time via a family friend who sent me a lengthy apology via email. I didn't respond. Neither did Megan. We did not open the door. It wasn't retaliation. Peace was that. Regarding Tom, I am unsure of his current location. I don't give a damn. The threat was never him. He was only the last straw, a representation of all the issues Megan and I hadn't discussed. Like a ghost called forth by a woman unable to let go of the past, he entered our marriage. However, we did. We gave it up. Gradually. Daily. And now when I wake up, my children burst into our room, their hair disheveled and their smiles drowsy. The man who paid for a trip that ended in betrayal doesn't seem like me. I feel like a man who lost everything when he went through a fire and yet managed to make it home. To a better home, not the same one. Story 4. Elena Martinez resided in a small, charming town in the Midwest. The cadence of life was as dependable as an old clock's ticking. However, that pattern had been disturbed by the unannounced arrival of 2 individuals ever since my mother's death. My sister-in-law Rachel and my mother-in-law Helen. They had a way of showing up at my house when I most wanted to be alone. You know, Elena keeping us waiting at the entrance is rather impolite. Helen would say, her voice brimming with submissive hostility. Rachel was grinning next to her, her eyes darting about my living room like a hawk. I would respond, "Sorry, I wasn't expecting anyone." Forced politeness strained my voice. Their visits had become into a frightening habit. They expected to be treated like kings and entertained every time they visited. In my own home, I am only a servant. Dear, our only purpose is to keep you company. Without your kids, you must feel quite alone. Helen would settle down on my couch and chastise me. Rachel would do the same, kicking back like she owned the place, and then the most annoying part would arrive. Why don't you get us some steaks, Elena? Without a healthy supper, our visit is not possible. With a gentle yet firm tone, Rachel would make a suggestion. However, it's almost 4 p.m., so I would only pathetically object. Helen would dismissively wave her hand. No, sweetheart. A delicious dinner may always be enjoyed at any time. Additionally, confirm that it's from that pricey downtown location. Rachel, don't you think we deserve a treat? I was feeling both angry and powerless as I reluctantly made the order and saw the bill's numbers rise. Even though I was exhausted after these steak meals, I lacked the bravery to confront them. I couldn't afford the financial pressure. However, Helen and Rachel did not appear to be aware of my situation. My spouse Michael's apathy just made things worse. His reactions were, at best, contemptuous whenever I attempted to bring up the subject with him. Their household. It's only a couple steaks, Elena. Don't worry about it too much, Michael would say, trying not to look at me. But Michael, that happens every day. Furthermore, money isn't the only factor. They are exploiting our generosity. I would argue, clearly frustrated. Elena, they have good intentions. He would say, you're overreacting, which would essentially end the conversation. This trend persisted for 2 arduous years. 2 years of unexpected visits, costly lunches, and mounting animosity. I had the impression that I was stuck in a cycle with no way out. I had no idea, though, that the true storm was still to come. Everything would alter with a storm. With Helen and Rachel's constant visits, the pattern carried on day after day, melting into the next. On the other hand, Michael arrived home one evening with a troubled expression on his face as the sun set and long shadows stretched across my living room. Sensing the seriousness in his tone, he spoke in an uncharacteristically harsh tone. Elena, we need to talk. I prepared myself. Michael, what is it? He inhaled deeply before dropping the bombshell without any prelude. Next week, Rachel's family and my parents will move in with us. You must tidy up your room. The room whirled around me. What, Michael? We call this place home. You must talk to me about it before making that decision. Michael's face was icy and unforgiving. The decision has been made, Elena. They require lodging, and it's time for us to contribute to the family. However, where should I go? My voice broke as I felt a mixture of hurt and incredulity. You work it out. You might be able to stay with a buddy. Dismissively, he said. My parents gave me this family home, but I was informed I didn't belong there. It wasn't only an insult. It was the worst form of treachery. As Michael went on, I stood there feeling numb. You always gripe about Rachel and Helen. In this manner, you will no longer have to cope with them. Each of his words pierced deeper than the one before it like daggers. At that moment, I recognized that the man in front of me was not the Michael I had married. He had turned into an unknown individual who prioritized his family over his spouse. Michael left me standing by myself in the darkened room as he left. Something blazed inside of me. Yes, a fire of rage, but more than that, a resolve to defend my rights. Despite the chaos inside of me, I said, I'll clear out the house, but not in the manner you anticipate. Michael stopped and smirked as he turned back. I had hoped you would fight harder. However, it's good that you're acting sensibly for once. He didn't comprehend. The resolve that had taken hold of me was invisible to him. I had been the obedient wife for years, going above and beyond to satisfy his and his family's every need. However, that is no longer the case. I started down the path to independence the following morning when Michael departed for his business trip. I grabbed the phone and punched in a number. The previous evening I had discovered. My instructions were clear, and I spoke calmly. I replied, Yes, I would like to arrange for a pickup of all of my appliances and furniture. With every word, a feeling of empowerment increases. Additionally, I have until the end of this week to finish it. I felt a wave of excitement as I hung up the phone. It was the start of my retaliation, a carefully thought out scheme to exact revenge on those who had harmed me. Michael was terribly mistaken to believe he had won. Yes, the house would be cleared out, but he and his priceless family would not be able to use it. One step at a time, I regained control. The days that followed were packed with activities. I made arrangements for the sale of furniture, arranged for movers, and packed my personal belongings in secret. All of my sentimental belongings were meticulously packed and prepared for shipment to my son's apartment in the city, which served as my new temporary haven. The home started to reverberate with the emptiness of its soon-to-be empty rooms as the movers labored. It seemed like I was losing a layer of the life I had created here with every piece of furniture that left the house. However, it relieved a burden from my shoulders. The home was a hollow shell of its previous warmth the day before Michael returned. I looked around one final time. My mind is racing with memories of tears and joy, of treasured memories that are now gone. But there was no time for sentimentality here. It was time to exact revenge. I wrote something on the empty kitchen counter. Its words are brief. Michael, I've cleaned out the house following your desire. I hope your new living situation goes well. Elena. I then left the life I had known behind and made my way to the metropolis. A mixture of exhilaration and trepidation about the future. My son gave me a warm but worried greeting when I arrived at his apartment. Are you certain about this, Mom? His brow wrinkled. He asked. Never have I been so sure, I answered. My determination is unflinching. As expected, my phone rang that night. Michael was the one. His voice was a mixture of anger and bewilderment. What on earth have you done, Elena? The home is deserted. Yes, Michael, you instructed me to vacate my room. I interpreted that to imply the whole home, I answered calmly. I did not intend that. You are aware of it. You're where? What about everything we own? What's mine is mine. You'll have to work out the rest. With a hint of delight in my voice, I spoke. I can't be subjected to this. To us. Desperation shattered Michael's voice. It's funny. I shot back. I thought the same thing when you decided to throw me out of my own house. After a little period of silence, Michael hung up. This was a start, but I knew it was only the beginning. A beginning to reclaim my life and honor. As I sat quietly in my son's apartment, I understood that this was more than retaliation. It was a declaration that I was no longer the Elena who would be ignored and stepped over. This was the beginning of a new chapter in which I would write my own tale. There was a sense of expectation when the gray light of dawn came through my son's apartment's curtains the next morning. My phone rang. Michael's name is displaying on the caller ID. I replied, preparing for the assault. I need you to return, Elena. This is insane. Michael's voice was a mixture of incredulity and rage. Michael, I'm not going back. You clearly didn't want me, I answered. I spoke steadily. You can't simply sell all we own and go. How about us? How about our union? You could hear the anguish in his voice. Us, our union. I sneered. When you put your family above me, it was finished. At my own house. On the other end, there was stillness. I was aware of my nerve-wracking. That's when I disclosed the entire scope of what I had done. Michael, too. As you so beautifully stated, I have begun the process of selling the house. Whoever previously owned it is irrelevant. Elena, you can't do that. I call it home. Panic was suddenly growing in his voice. No more. Michael. Additionally, I'm sure Helen and Rachel can assist you in finding a new residence because you're so worried about family. The line died. For the first time in years, I felt in charge of my own fate, even though I knew it wasn't over yet. Later that day, Rachel called, her voice dripping with hatred. You are a cunning witch. How could you harm us like this? What are we meant to do? The same spot you thought I would go? I gave a chilly response. Helen and you were really keen to move into my house. I'm sure you can work something out. You'll pay for this, Elena. You think you're so brilliant. But you're nothing without us, Rachel growled before hanging up. Their threats and pleads persisted throughout the following few days. But I stayed resolute. I had spent too many years being twisted and undermined. It was time they confronted the repercussions of their deeds. As I started my new work in the city, a sensation of independence overtook me. I was no longer the doormat Elena, but a woman who stood up for herself. As I accepted this new era, the drama and volatility of my previous life seemed like a faraway memory. My retaliation ultimately involved more than simply selling off property or emptying a house. It was about taking back my dignity and sense of worth. For the final time, Michael, Helen, and Rachel had underestimated me. I was finally able to move on, leaving them to clean up the mess they had made, liberated from their poisonous hold. My life in the city began to take on a rhythm of its own as the weeks stretched into months. Michael, Helen, and Rachel's calls decreased in frequency. Their voices are losing ground to my renewed determination. I had begun to create a life for myself, one that was unaffected by their control and manipulation. I was sitting in my small but comfortable apartment one afternoon when my lawyer called with some news. Elena, your divorce and the house have been finalized by the court. Legally, you own it. Michael's assertion was rejected. I experienced a wave of relief. This victory went beyond the law. It was confirmation. It served as evidence that I had been correct to defend myself and resist the injustice that had been inflicted upon me. However, how all I have is that house. Later that day, Michael's disbelieving voice reverberated over the telephone. Michael, you made your decisions. You put your family before your spouse. You now have to live with those decisions. I spoke with a finality that reflected the sense of closure I was experiencing on the inside. But where am I going, Elena? I have nothing. He begged. I don't care about that anymore, Michael. I said, you ought to have considered that earlier, and hung up. During the ensuing weeks, I heard rumors from friends who were still in my hometown. Rachel, Helen, and Michael were compelled to relocate to a dilapidated apartment on the outskirts of town. In sharp contrast to the luxury they had always taken for granted, their once luxurious lifestyles were now a daily struggle. I heard about the ongoing arguments between Helen and Rachel and how their relationship was strained as a result of their new circumstances. It appeared that Michael had turned to gambling in an attempt to regain some of their lost wealth, but this just served to further depress them. Once painful, these stories now appeared far away, even alien. I had moved on and was creating a life for myself and no one else. I had a rewarding work in the city, and I spent my nights enjoying my newfound independence. I ran into Anthony, a buddy from my hometown who had also relocated to the city one day when I was strolling through the busy city streets. We talked about our experiences and took comfort in them. It's amazing how much you've changed, Elena. With awe in his eyes, Anthony remarked, you're like a completely different person. Anthony needed to be changed. I said that it was the only way I could rescue myself. As we conversed, I couldn't help but smile, realizing that Anthony and I shared more than just our history. We connected because we had both experienced hardships that had molded and strengthened us. I had never anticipated the adventure that life had put me on. I had confronted my concerns, confronted those who had hurt me, and emerged from the experience stronger. My narrative told the story of a lady who rose from the ashes of her past to take back her life, and I knew that I was prepared for whatever was ahead as I looked to the future. I entered my new life with my head held high and my soul undamaged, a life in which my fate was in my hands. Story 5. I'm 22 years old, and my name is Jason. Last month, I received my degree from university. Complete scholarship. The entire package for years of enduring restless nights, working double shifts, and waking up at 8 in the morning. Lectures, I worked primarily alone. My parents made no payment at all. They were always investing in my younger brother Caleb, not because they couldn't. He is 18 years old, and he would be pure gold if precious children were money. Worldwide soccer camps and private tutoring, designer clothing. In the meantime, I was repairing holes in my shoes and extending the shelf life of instant noodles for many days. I never really complained, though. I promised myself that it would all be worthwhile when I crossed the graduation threshold. At last, my parents would treat me with the same importance they showed Caleb. For months, I had been preparing for graduation day. In addition to purchasing a good camera so they could snap pictures afterwards, I made reservations for 3 seats in the front row under my name. My speech was prepared, and my gown was pressed. Yes, I was chosen to speak as a student. Above everything else, I had hope. Perhaps foolish, but alive. I'm hoping they'll arrive. Let's cheer. Perhaps even give me a hug and say something along those lines afterwards. Jason, you have our admiration. All I ever wanted was that. I texted them the address once again the morning before the ceremony. Even though there was no answer when I called, I reasoned that perhaps they were simply running late. Or perhaps they wished to take me by surprise. When I took the stage to speak, I looked around the audience. Those faces. Parents holding their phones, sobbing behind sunglasses and grinning so broadly that it seemed like their faces could break, but mine didn't. Reserve tags were flying in the wind like little flags of desertion, yet their seats were still empty. I then sneaked away as others gathered around me with flowers and cheers. Hearing one more mother's words made me sick. We are really proud of you. I went home to someone else's child. No missed calls, no messages. Perhaps something had occurred, I thought. However, when I accessed Instagram, because I did, of course, they were aboard a Caribbean sailing yacht when I noticed them. Senior trip for Caleb. The message showed my dad shirtless at the top like some kind of budget, my mum sipping a drink in her huge sunglasses, James Bond and Caleb laughing in the background, and a football being thrown in midair. They appeared content. Nor preoccupied, nor anxious, simply content. Furthermore, I wasn't even mentioned. I refrained from crying. I refrained from screaming. I sat there looking at the screen for a long time. I then blocked them on everything and erased all of their contacts threads and any traces from my phone. When my roommate got home that night, I was still in my graduation robe and sitting quietly. No, they didn't show up. He inquired. I just gave a head shake. I purchased a one-way ticket to Seattle the next day. I had secured a position at a computer company where I had been working remotely as an intern, and they were more than willing to let me start early. No note was left by me. After packing and taking the diploma they had never seen, I just departed. There was radio quiet for a week until one Friday afternoon. Someone knocked on my door. When I opened it, my dad was there looking older and carrying a weather-wrinkled manila envelope in one hand. In some way. His eyes were weary, his shoulders slumped. He tried to smile as if we were resuming our talk from the previous weekend. "Hey, kid," he said. I remained silent. Simply gazed. "I brought this to you." He held out the envelope and went on. My diploma was inside. The authentic one. The one that was sent to my parents' home. I hadn't made the necessary updates. I cautiously grabbed it from him and then turned to face him as I waited. He seemed unsure of whether to enter or remain in the hallway as he glanced around. "I didn't know," he finally responded. It was only when we returned that I realized. "Your mother mistook the event for the next day. I promise. Jason. Had I known, I would have interrupted him. A yacht was where you were," Caleb and I said. It didn't appear to be a last-minute error. He nodded, looking down. "We made a mistake. I am aware of your mother's health. We never meant to upset you, but she's humiliated and has trouble expressing sorry." I only chuckled. Not for fun. It was the sort of shocked, empty chuckle you get when someone says something so untrue that you're not even sure how to react. "It wasn't your intention to harm me," I remarked a little louder now. "My entire life you have been doing it." The culmination was graduation. That made him wince, as if he hadn't anticipated my resistance, as if I were still the calm, appreciative child who didn't ask for much. He began, Jason, but I had already finished. You're here, but why? I folded my arms and asked. Is this a tour of your redemption? You present the diploma. Take me out to supper, perhaps. Feel like you done your part by posting a selfie. He gave a short shake of his head. No. I'm here because you need to know something. I waited, staring at him. He lowered his voice to almost a whisper. Caleb requested a vehicle. Said that the one we bought him the previous year wasn't cool enough. He indicated that we would have to wait a little while. Why don't you simply sell Jason's vehicle? By now, he's most likely living on a bus bench. The comments struck me more strongly than I had anticipated, not because they were unexpected, but rather because they were so informal and self-assured. I wasn't just forgotten by Caleb. He thought I was nothing and that I had failed. For the first time, my dad's voice broke as he went on. I informed him. You were doing good, I told him. You left because we weren't there for you and you had a job. He also chuckled. Jason laughed. I realized then that we had raised him incorrectly. Additionally, I believe we let you both down. His eyes were moist as he gazed up at me. I realize now that I don't merit your pardon. I doubt I ever will. I simply needed to see you, though, to make sure you were all right. Try to solve this, perhaps. I took a while to respond. I felt like slamming the door. A part of me wanted to pull him in and release years of suppressed suffering. However, even that seemed excessive. I watched as he struggled to keep quiet. It was strange. My whole youth. The loudest man in the room had been him. Big opinions, loud voice, and constant dominance at family gatherings and meal settings. He simply appeared little now. At last, I moved slightly out of the way so he could go in if he so desired. After hesitating, he entered carefully as if he were entering a courtroom rather than an apartment. I didn't offer a seat or coffee. I simply waited while leaning on the counter. He was standing in the middle of the living room, gazing at the little bookcase that I had stocked with used books and outdated programming manuals. Then he noticed a framed picture on the shelf. I was by myself in my gown, displaying my diploma in the mirror. Just before I left that evening, I had taken it. Do you still dress in the suit? He pointed to it as if it were a treasured artifact, as he inquired. No, I responded bluntly. The next day I gave it back. Did not have the money to retain it. His shoulders fell once again as if each of my words were a stab to the ribs. Look, Jason, I get that it feels pointless to turn up now. Perhaps it is. But when Caleb said that about you, something inside of me snapped. I began to recall all of the occasions you requested assistance. We also advised you to persevere. About the time we missed your piano recital due to Caleb's soccer match. Or the time you were accepted to 3 universities, and we suggested that a community college would be more useful. I believed I was being reasonable. Perhaps we were simply pushing you away, but I believed we were giving you more freedom. I didn't answer. Not quite yet. Let him have a seat in it, he continued. Your mother saw the voicemail you left when we returned from the trip. The one contains the information about graduation. I hadn't even given it a listen. I struck myself because I was too preoccupied configuring the boat's Bluetooth speaker. She just remarked, "Let it go," when we discovered that the diploma had been mailed to the residence. He'll calm down. However, I was unable to. What if you don't cool off? I kept asking myself. What if this is it, isn't it? Silently, I said. He blinked. What I said again, this is it. Dad, you missed more than just my graduation. I was missed. Caleb and I didn't get that way by ourselves. He picked up the lesson from seeing you treat me like a stand-in and him like a prince. He started to speak, but I interrupted him once more. Do you recall when I was offered the internship during my sophomore year, the one at the capital of the state? He gave a nod. I told you over the phone, I quote what you stated. That's good. Hey, next weekend Caleb has a game. Are you coming? You didn't even inquire about the purpose of the internship. For a state lawmaker, I was drafting legislation. You only asked whether I would come watch Caleb chase a ball, even though I had already met 2 senators. His mouth parted once more and then shut again. No defense, no justifications. Nothing but quiet. So yes, I went on. It's this. I am no longer the irate child. An apology is not what I'm after. I'm not even seeking retribution. I finally have a life. You never cheered as loudly as my buddies did. I am more than just a backup plan for a boss who shows up in a city. You handed the boat to Caleb. You gave me the motivation to briefly leave you behind. I was afraid he might weep. He swallowed hard and glanced at the floor before turning back to face me. His voice cracked as he replied, "You don't have to forgive me." Can I, though? Is there anything I can do to correct it? Anything. At last, I approached the desk, grabbed my phone, and retrieved a picture. I was the one holding up the key card in front of a black Tesla. I swiveled the screen in his direction. I said I purchased this last week. Paid in full. No loans. Since high school, I have been an investor. Caleb was quietly receiving B-minuses from private tutors and blowing through 5 pairs of Jordans. I was reading about compound interest and learning how to code. What's the best part, you ask? He looked at the picture, unable to speak. That automobile was out of your price range, not even close. Caleb now desires one. Isn't that why you're actually here? He winced. However, I already knew the response. I remarked. Caleb is the golden boy. But isn't he no longer golden? Because you now understand that he is unable of standing by himself and that he collapses into me if you don't support him. You let me to tumble. I've learned how to fly a lot. Nothing else could be said. I pulled the door open. In the entryway, my father paused. I'm really proud of you, Jason. He turned to go when I nodded once too late, but he turned back and whispered something. I was surprised. More than everything he had said so far, it showed me. If that's the case, I pray Caleb never learns your residence. After that, he left, and I stood there pondering his exact meaning. Until the following week, when I had a knock on the door that wasn't from my landlord or a delivery man. I looked at the individuals. Caleb was beaming as if he had just won the lotto. I was slow to open the door. I simply gazed as the person's heart began to speed. It was something more difficult to identify than terror. Disgust. Perhaps. Incredulity. That smile of his. It wasn't informal. It was arrogant. As if he had come to get what he believed was rightfully his. After 3 quick, assured taps, he knocked once more and leant little too near the door. I know you're in there, Chase, he continued. Please don't make me stick out here like an outsider. It nearly made me chuckle. Slowly, I moved away from the door. I had my phone with me prepared to call security if necessary. I did not, however, push the call button. Not quite yet. I was curious to know his thoughts. He continued to speak. Clear yet muffled voice. Man, please stop acting this way. All I want to do is chat, not a drama. You're doing great, Dad replied. New vehicle, new location, and congrats. A pause occurred. Speaking of the automobile, actually. It's sick. The 3rd model. Correct, everything is dark. You've always liked that tidy appearance. A silence, again, followed by a chuckle. You can even afford something like that after all. That statement struck me more strongly than I had anticipated, though, so I suppose being the dull one eventually paid off. It was the precise way he used to speak to me when I was a child, not because it was offensive. Dull. The term was always that. Caleb was either punished for sneaking out or flipping off diving boards. I was working on my schoolwork. Preparing in advance. Avoiding difficulty. You received notice. I was given a label. Our parents found it simpler to write me off as uninteresting than to acknowledge that I was subtly surpassing their expectations. Caleb went on, I'll leave you a number. Have you got a new phone? Later text me. All I want to do is get a bite, get caught up. Not a huge deal. He concealed an object beneath the door, apparently his business card. However, Caleb had no business. All it included was his name, phone number, and a corny Instagram moniker reminiscent of the Caleb the King classic. I didn't pick it up until I was certain he was gone. No apology, no message, no recognition of what had occurred. He assigned himself a moniker and a number for the following few days as usual. I didn't answer. Not that I was tempted. However, he was the first to text. Informal. Hey, I can't believe you've already abandoned me. Then more tenacious. You're the only one living here. Oh no, it must be pleasant. Then a little sharper. Do you believe that you are now superior to everyone just because you have a Tesla and a job? I disregarded all of the messages, but I felt a change in my gut. I suspected he wasn't there by himself. I suspected that my father had sent him to see how things would go, or worse, to get something from me. Caleb never found me, according to that last statement. Perhaps there was no worry. It may have been a warning. Then, however strange things happened. One morning, Caleb was resting on the hood of my car as I came downstairs, simply waiting. He waved and smiled at me as if we were roommates in college running into each other in a supermarket. Calm down, dude. All I wanted was a close-up look at the automobile. You must go, he replied. I informed him. He sneered. All right, relax. Don't pretend that I'm the federal government. I'm only appreciating your accomplishment, dude. To be honest, I'm glad for you. I had the opportunity to inquire, but I remained silent. He went on, dropping his voice and gently leaning in. Do you work in finance or something? Like the lottery crypto? What is the matter? I gave a headshake. Hard work. He obviously didn't buy it, as he raised an eyebrow. No. Jace, hurry up. You've always been intelligent, but not to this extent. A Tesla. An apartment in a high-rise building. Either someone left you anything or you hit it big. It sounded like a joke from him. However, the tone was not reflected in his gaze. They were astute and strategic. I earned it. I said it again. And you must go. He didn't press any harder, to his credit. Simply tapped the car's roof and replied, Okay. However, I wouldn't object to you lending a hand to your small brother if you're feeling giving. You know I'm having trouble with my vehicle. Just something respectable. Even a pre-owned Audi or Beamer is a step forward. Only one step. He hesitated. I owe you nothing. I said, not an explanation, not a car. Not even this discussion. He took a moment to blink. He lost his mask. Whoa. All right. Now that he was a big man, he turned and left without saying anything more. I saw him leave. I didn't trust him to not circle back while I wasn't looking, not because I was scared. The days that followed were calm. Too silent. He didn't text and didn't return. I began to calm down, thinking that may be it. Perhaps he had received the message. However, I received a call from a banned number late one evening. I let the voicemail go. Then another. And yet another. I picked it up for the third time. A moment of quiet fell. Then a low, nearly whispering voice. I shouldn't have been so humiliated by you. Do you believe that you are now untouchable? Do you really believe I won't figure out a method to balance the score? I said nothing at all. I am aware of what Caleb stated. Items you wouldn't desire. Our parents are aware of the small side business you launched your sophomore year. Do you recall the laptop you took out of the university lab? The one you didn't bring back? My stomach turned over. After he hung up, I became aware of something. He wasn't only there to sulk. His purpose was to extort me. That night, I didn't get any sleep. Long after the call was over, I could still hear Caleb's voice. It had been years since I had given that laptop any regard. During a COVID lockout in our sophomore year, the university provided us with temporary computers so we could work remotely. At the conclusion of the semester, the majority of individuals sent theirs back. I didn't. Not intentionally, but the IT department just stopped responding to tickets because mine collapsed soon before exams and they were overloaded. I cleaned the computer, repaired it myself, and utilized it to create my first coding tasks as a freelancer. It was foolish. Technically dishonest, yes, but not really a crime. I knew Caleb, though. Truth didn't matter to him. Control was important to him. I received 3 additional messages from burner phones by morning. They were all evasive threats disguised as genuine worry. I would hate for parents to believe that their ideal kid used stolen goods to build his future. If your employer found out, how would they feel? You believe your small tower is secure up there? You're not. That final one had a picture of my apartment complex from the other side of the street. My hands shaking, I gazed at it for a long time. It came from a seething wrath that had been building for years, not from fear. Like he did with our parents, Caleb believed he could subdue me. He believed that I would give in, pay him off, give him the keys to an apartment or a car, and call it quits. However, he was unaware that something had changed. When our parents failed to remember my birthday for 2 consecutive years, I wasn't the same Jason who kept silent. When Caleb partied, I wasn't the Jason who worked double shifts. Does anyone have money for studying abroad? Jason used to tell himself that I wasn't the same person. Just get it through to graduation. I was no longer surviving. I finished playing defense and started constructing. I started by sending an email to the legal department of my business. I was succinct, professional, and proactive. I explained that none of their work had ever come into contact with the university laptop, acknowledged my error, and notified them about it. I've even included the files and logs from my switch to my new configuration. Caleb wasn't going to catch me off guard, but I wasn't sure whether he was bluffing. They responded in a matter of hours. One of the partners told me that was not a problem and thanked me for being honest. You have been a tremendous assistance. The email was read. Don't allow somebody to use your history as a weapon. With that armor on. I proceeded to step 2, revealing Caleb's true nature. I wasn't seeking petty retribution. I didn't want to embarrass him online or have him jailed. I wanted something cleaner and easier. I wanted to cut him off. He flourished as a result of my parents' indulgence, financial support, justifications, and safety net. However, what if that net vanished? What if they had my perception of him? Rightfully so. Dangerous and lazy. I started putting everything down in a new document. Nor gossip, nor trivial tales. Dates, facts, screenshots, and messages he gave me, boasting about cheating on his girlfriend, falsifying his father's checks, and fabricating internship paperwork to gain admission to his expensive private school. Pictures showing him having a good time on the family's dime when he was studying overseas. The whole digital footprint of a golden child who had never worked a day was sent to Venmo receipts and direct messages. I wrote just one phrase and forwarded it to our parents. Since you did not attend my graduation. Think of this as my speech that was postponed. They didn't respond. Not immediately. However, I woke up to a barrage of alerts the next morning. Mom, is this authentic? This isn't genuine, tell me. Jason, we must speak. Give us a call. My father. Where did you purchase this? We didn't know. I apologize. Then, Caleb, you believe you're intelligent. Do you believe that anything will be fixed by this? You will never be chosen above me. Never. I hope we don't cross paths again. This time there are no threats, just poison, exposed and undiluted. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. All the work was done by the silenced. An old neighbor told me throughout the course of the next week that my parents had financially distanced Caleb from me. No longer free rent, no more allowance. They even terminated his contract, making him vacate his residence in the heart of the city. It seems like my mother wept for 2 days. My dad completely stopped answering Caleb's calls. I didn't rejoice, not quite. However, knowing that they had finally seen the truth brought them a sense of tranquil contentment. Caleb, for his part, attempted to strike back. A few days later, I received a call from the IT office at my former university. An anonymous tip had been made that I had taken something from the school. However, I had already sent them an email outlining everything and even offering to cover the laptop's cost at that point. They dismissed it with a laugh. Weeks prior, I had already contributed to their STEM scholarship fund. I was even recalled by one of the filmmakers. We receive these advice from envious siblings more often than you think they said when they called back to reassure us. I couldn't resist, grinning. Caleb sent me a letter the last time I heard from him. A letter in hard copy. Poor penmanship. It seemed as if he had written it at the rear of a petrol station. No address for return, no envelope. It stated, "You ruined everything. You're just bitter even if you believe you're so noble. You couldn't handle the fact that they loved me more. Well done on your victory." Nothing. Last Saturday, after reading it once, I threw it in the garbage. I saw the sun strike the side of my Tesla as I stood in the parking garage of my new office building. Caleb, our parents, and the years of being shunned were not on my mind. For once, I didn't feel the need to prove anything to anyone, and I was reflecting on how far I'd come. Not as a trophy, but as a memory of who I was, what I went through, and the version of myself who crossed the stage without receiving any applause and continued, "I still have the diploma on my shelf. I'm here because of